The chairperson of Technical Session 1 and the interactive session is Professor Manush Chakraborty. CMA Dr. Manush Chakraborty is a professor of commerce of University of Gaurbanga. He completed MCom and PhD from University of Calcutta and an associate member of Institute of Cost Accountants of India. He started his career as an accounts executive at Citibank in 1996. Thereafter, he joined Balurghat College in 1999 as an assistant professor. In 2012, he joined University of Gaurbanga, Malda as an associate professor. He is currently working as professor of commerce in the same university. Dr. Chakraborty has more than 12 years of teaching experience at undergraduate level and 9 years teaching experience at postgraduate level. He has 8 years of research experience and he has completed 2 UGC research projects. More than 30 articles of Dr. Chakraborty was published in national and international journals and he has written 3 books. We welcome you, sir, in this program. In our technical session 1, we have 3 eminent speakers with us. Let me introduce them to you. Our first speaker is Dr. Bishwajit Mondol. He is going to speak on economy during post-COVID-19. Dr. Mondol is an associate professor of Department of Economics and Politics, Vishwabharati University, Birbhum. Dr. Mondol has over 20 years of teaching experience and his research interest lies in international trade, theory and policy, economics of development, and industrial organization. He has innumerable publications in national and international journals and many awards and accolades. We welcome you, sir. Our second speaker is C.A. Chirunjib Das. His topic is Are the policies positively charged to wheel the economy? Mr. Das is a practicing chartered accountant and partner with Roy Choudhury and Moitro, Kolkata. He is an empaneled GST faculty of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. With over 21 years of teaching experience, he had been associated with many premier institutions of India. We welcome you, sir, in this program. Our last speaker of Technical Session 1 is Dr. Shashwati Choudhury, Associate Professor, Department of Economics, St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. She was formerly the Head of Economics in the Department of Commerce and had long been associated with this esteemed institution since 2001. She is currently a guest faculty in the Department of Economics, St. Xavier's University, Kolkata. Her research and teaching focuses on social and economic issues, informalization of labor, and the gender implications of the process, social protection, and issues related to migration. She has a number of publications in national and international journals to her credit. We welcome you, ma'am. Now I hand over the session to Dr. Manush Chakraborty, Chairperson of Technical Session 1, to carry out the program.
Hello, is it audible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes,
Yes, sir.
audible.
Okay, thank you, Sridhaman, and very good morning to all of you. This is Technical Session 1, and at first I'd like to thanks and my sincere gratitude to Malda College and SNS Shivna Shasti College for organizing such a relevant and very relevant and beautiful webinar, international webinar. Now, as you know that we are going through a very tough phase, and it is COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the outbreak of coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, first identified in Wuhan, the capital of Hubei, China, in December 2009, and since then having spread globally, has been recognized as a pandemic by the WHO, that is World Health Organization, on 11th March 2020. The effect of COVID-19 pandemic is badly felt and noticed in 221 countries worldwide, including India. Mainly to save human life loss, the government of India, by following the measures taken by other affected countries, has opted for lockdown and social distancing procedure to fight against COVID-19 pandemic since midnight of 24th March 2020. The logic behind the lockdown to the policymaker was loss in human life is much greater than economic loss. Thus, lockdown and social distancing substantially reduced human life loss, but it badly affects countries' economic status, mainly the supply chain management, which compelled the firm to temporarily suspend the operation or significantly reduce the operation. These affect the firm's growth and ultimately country's GDP growth in a negative way and broaden the fiscal deficit. India's GDP estimate were downgraded even more to negative. Now it was projected that for 2020-21 it will be minus 5% to negative figures signaling a deep recessions. On 26th May, CRISIL announced that this will perhaps the India's worst recession since independence. Now, during the lockdown, an estimated 14 crore or 140 million people lost employment, while salaries were cut for many others. More than 45% of households across the nations have reported an income drop as compared to the previous year. The most affected people due to COVID-19 pandemic are the marginalized section of people, mainly migrated workers, artisans, small entrepreneurs, and professionals. COVID-19 pandemic make the issue of migrated worker an important part of the Indian economy now. However, the government of India, along with RBI, announced a variety of measures to tackle the situations like food security, extra funds for healthcare, and for the states, sector-related incentives, tax deadline extensions, change in FDI policy, loan moratorium, incentives for the MSMEs, etc. It is presumed that these measures will make India Atmanirbhar to combat the probable recession caused by COVID-19 pandemic. Now, on this background, in technical session 1, we have 3 distinguished speakers. As mentioned earlier by Sritama, Dr. Bishwajit Mondal is very known to me, a very good speaker. And he is from Vishwabharati, Department of Economics and Politics. Dr. Chiranjeev Das, a practicing chartered accountant. And Dr. Shashwati Chaudhuri, faculty member of JVS College and University. That first, I'd like to request Dr. Bishwajit Mondal to deliver his lecture on this issue. Please, Dr. Mondal.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so probably my video is not yet. Yeah, I'm just clicking on it. Okay. So, before I start, may I just request all other participants on behalf of the organizer to switch off their videos, because it creates a lot of problem sometimes, and often it gives an impression that somebody else is presenting his screen. So it would be nice if all of them, apart from the organizers and the speakers and the chairperson, if of others, please switch off their video and audio. Audio is already switched off. I can see that. So that would help the organizer to look at this issue. Take care of the problem very clearly. Okay, so now coming back to what I'm supposed to say. Okay, so before I start, let me just thank you, the organizers of Malda College and Shivnath Shastri College, particularly Shomo Banerjee of Shivnath Shastri College, for inviting me to talk about what I understand about the economic impacts during COVID-19 and the economic impacts that we can expect in the post-COVID-19 scenario. So this is the main thing I will talk about. But before I go to the discussion, I doubly thank the organizers to put me in the session where the chairperson is Professor Manoj Chakraborty. You'd be amazed to know both of us started our career as academician from the same college way back in 2001. So Professor Manoj Chakraborty, very happy to be united with you, though the platform is virtual here. So thank you, Manoj da. Okay, so yeah, okay. So at the very beginning of my talk, I want to confess one thing. This is essentially my inability. So can I just pin my video here so that all of you can see me, and if I share my screen, you can see full screen? Administrator, I'm just requesting the administrator or the coordinator. Can you please pin my video, or I can pin my video here? Can you see me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So what I was saying is that, so this is essentially my inability regarding what? Inability regarding data, inability regarding analyzing data, inability regarding memorizing data. So what is the exact number of the corona infection, death rates? So it's very difficult for me to memorize all these things. But these are all available on the net, so you can, at any point of time, you can check. In fact, just I was checking, and I found that total number of corona infection at this moment worldwide, it is almost 67 lakhs, and death is more than 3 lakhs. It's nearing 4 lakhs, and recovered is 32 lakhs. So this is the information that I have. Rather, I would try to look at the issue from a slightly tangential perspective in the sense that what is the root of this transmission? And as Professor Chakraborty said in his introductory speech, that essentially it started in the Wuhan, China, and then it went to Italy, and there is a place called Lombardy. Lombardy is very close to Milan, and Milan, all you know, it's a very rich place. The rich people stay there. And this is fashion garments, or garment sectors are there. So you can call it a fashion hub. So a lot of people from China work there. There is a kind of relationship, trade relationship between Italy and China. And then from Italy, it came back to Iran. And then from Iran, it took the big jump and spread all over the world. So, and eventually what Professor Chakraborty said, that who declared it's a global pandemic. So now, if you look at this thing, it gives us an idea that whether this COVID-19 or the coronavirus is taking the route of Silk Road. So just when I'm saying this, I was just thinking of whether any kind of virus that starts in China that follows the same route. I was not aware of the fact. A few days back, I came to know the same thing had happened during smallpox. Smallpox started in China. Then it went to Italy, then came back to Iran, and then all other parts of the globe, including India. So this gives me some sort of impression whether trade or any bilateral trade or migration of workers has any relation with the spread of this COVID virus. That has happened some 2000 years back during time of smallpox. So it's very surprising. So we started to work a little on the empirical arguments behind it. In fact, this is a still work in progress thing. So we collected some data from different countries, and I will tell you what are the different sets of countries we have considered here. So, and found that taking some other controls or explanatory variables like GDP, health infrastructure, and age composition, no, not health infrastructure, age composition, trade, FDI, and migration. And then interestingly, what I found is that, yes, it is trade and migration. These two covariates, or the explanatory variables, or the factors, are significantly responsible in spreading COVID infection around the globe. So we haven't considered health infrastructure, because the precise reason for not considering health infrastructure is that health infrastructure can be helpful in essentially reducing the death rate or reducing the essentially it reduces the mortality rate of the infected people. But the infection rate, it has nothing to do with the health infrastructure a priori. But yes, of course, after a certain time, 1 month or 2 months, general public health system plays a significant role there. So the result that we got, this is essentially for two broad groups of group of countries. One is BRI country, and the other is non-BRI country. BRI is an initiative; it's an infrastructural development initiative where it is taken by China. It is Belt and Road Initiative. So we just segregated these countries into these two broad groups. One is BRI, the member of BRI with China, and other is non-BRI. Non-BRI countries are essentially the developed countries. I mean, India is also the non-BRI countries, though India is not yet the developed countries. And we found that for the BRI countries, which are in contract with China regarding this BRI agreement, for those countries, trade is a little less significant. The impact of trade is a little less. Rather, for non-BRI countries, the trade is more significant. It has more profound effect on that. So that, again, gives us the impression that probably for BRI countries, it is not only because of trade, it is because of... Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, carry on.
Okay.
Everything is okay.
Okay, thank you. So probably for the non-BRI, BRI countries, they are emphasizing, other than trade, they are emphasizing more on migration, because since BRI is an infrastructural development project, a lot of people can migrate from other countries to China and from China to that countries. And if you add these two dimensions with the thing that we are experiencing presently, so the spread of COVID-19 took this route of trade and migration. So the natural outcome is that to curb this outbreak of COVID-19, across the globe, people went for global lockdown. So this global lockdown leads rise to another problem. So we are exposed to two different problems. One is death due to COVID. The other is death due to hunger, that Professor Dandapat said, that maybe because of starvation. So we need to do a sort of trade-off between these two things. So the bottom line is that it's a question of death. So no, I should not say it's a question of death, because it is a little morbid and pessimistic. So let me put it in a different way. So it's a question of life and associated risk, whether your life is at risk or not. Yes, our life is at risk. One is due to COVID, that is a health issue. The other is due to lockdown related economic problems that we might face in coming months. So we had to figure out an exit strategy that probably we will develop later, and some other economists are working on this. What would be the optimal lockdown strategy to minimize the sum of these deaths? Deaths, one is due to COVID, the other is due to lockdown. And here I want to mention about one important paper which is becoming very popular these days, is that paper written by Devraj Rai and Subramaniam. Devraj Rai is a professor of economics in New York University, and Subramaniam probably is a retired professor of Madras School of Economics. So they wanted to say kind of this thing that you should go for a partial lockdown, and if you go for partial lockdown, you should allow the healthier member of your family to work for the economy and work for the society. Otherwise, total economy will be stopped. If the economy functioning of the economy stops, then nothing remains. The starvation or the death due to hunger, death due to riots, food riots, this is inevitable. So Professor Roy and Subramaniam they were very correct in this. But I have some reservation regarding this thing, because what Professor Roy and Subramaniam said, you have to bank on self-selection. Self-selection means you have to select who is willing to work and who is going to work. So if you look at this issue very carefully, a relatively rich or the upper middle class, they have some amount of savings with them. So they are not going to, willingly, they are not going to send the member of their family to work. So who are forced to send the member of your family to go to the work? It is essentially the rich, poor people, the poorest of the poor. And now, look at the settlement of the poorest of the poor. Look at the residential quality and the condition of the poorest and the poor. So they live in a very small place, and they live with their parents, they live with their children. So when they will come back from work, the aged people and the parents in their family and the children will be at risk again. So this is not a viable option, but I'm sure Professor Rai will be working on this, and he will come out with a definitely solid theoretical model, and there is no doubt about it. But to my mind, what comes is that, if we can think of a sort of, cooperative farming kind of thing, or can think of a community shelter when the working people can come back, but they will not come back to their residence, but they will essentially come back to the place where the government has arranged for their stay. So they can stay there, and it is the responsibility of the state to take care of their parents and the children. So this is one solution, but it has also some flip side. Flip side is that, so our country and the economy is completely ridden with class and caste. So whether you go for a community shelter or go for a cooperative farming, so this kind of issue may become very prominent, and it may become very difficult to handle with. And another thing is that this cooperative farming was introduced by famous Chinese leader and Mao Zedong, you can name it in this way. So in the year 1953, and that was the policy of Great Leap Forward. So this is very popular policy, and because of this cooperative farming policy, the output, agricultural output in China went up by 14 times. But at the same time, that also led to the famine, the greatest famine of modern times, that led to 20 to 30 million deaths. So essentially, it's not whether you can produce or not. The question comes to whether the production reaches the people who badly needs it. So this is again the argument that Professor Sen repeatedly pointed out while explaining the Bengal famine of 1943. So it is again the responsibility of the state to ensure how the supply, how the produce actually reaches the needy people. So these are the issues that one has to look at. But yes, but the technical issues, there are two important papers in this regard, but these two papers are very technical. So I'm not going to go into the details of those papers. One is a working paper by a person who is working in the University of Cambridge, and the other is a very Eichenbaum and Rebello and some another person. So essentially, they also try to look at the macroeconomics of epidemics. So this is also a theoretical one. This is working paper version, NB working paper, and so two of them are working with Northwestern University. This is a very famous university in the United States of America, and one is with the Free University, the Free University of Berlin, Germany. So these are very technical. So I'm not going into the details of these two things. I mean, more complicated and technical issues. But again, let me go back to what Professor Manush Boiddo and Professor Dandapad said at the inaugural session, is that it is not me and it is not you, it is now known to all of us, and eventually World Bank declared, when it was declaring that it is going to be, who declared global pandemic, and immediately after that, World Bank confessed, accepted the fact that we are going to face economic crisis, and the severity of this economic crisis would be more than what we experienced during Great Depression of 1930s. And not to forget that, immediately after Great Depression, one strand of economics, I mean, they came into, not, I should not say that came into existence, but actually, that got the boost. That is the Keynesian economics. So maybe that after this COVID-19 crisis, we will come up with some mix of another economic ideologies, economic ideas. So, if I look at this Keynesian economics in simple word, economics is a very simple thing. Essentially, it talks about demand and supply, and there's a market. So I have to have the commodity that I want to have, and there must be a supplier who is ready to give me that, and in exchange of that, he wants some money, and that's the price. And that's it. Economics essentially revolves around these things, demand and supply. Keynes talked about the demand side. And there is another famous economist, which a French economist. Keynes was British economist. The French economist was, whose name was J.B. Say, Jean-Baptiste Say. So Say's law, there is another law, which is popularly known as Say's law. Say's law creates this, Say's law says that supply creates its own demand. So if you look at this thing, supply creates its own demand, and try to understand what is happening now in India. Probably this is partly mentioned by Professor Dandapad in his lecture, that we are trying to address this issue from the supply side. So this was the idea of J.B. Say, and he said that if you produce, you can supply by way of producing thing, you can create a lot of employment, there would be generation of money. but it has some its own merits and demerits. But Keynesian argument of aggregate demand, boosting aggregate demand, is more popular, more effective, and at this time, I also believe that this should be the main idea of the government to boost aggregate demand. Production is essentially, production. When I'm trying to produce something, I'm taking a risk. So when I'm taking a risk, I look at what can happen in future. So if I expect that there should not be any demand in the market, I am not a person to invest my money there. So if I expect that there is a demand in the market, yeah, it's my time to invest my money and get back some profit and go away. So that has to be there. That has to be ensured. And the people say that, what is the point of putting money in raising aggregate demand? And, Keynesian analysis, there is a popular saying, which is very interesting. You might understand that. What Keynes said, if needed, you have to dig holes on the earth and fill them back. And by doing this, you just ensure that some money is transferred to the people who need it. So if you look at the output of this activity, essentially it's zero. You are digging hole and filling them back with the same thing. So your output is zero. So what's the point of doing this thing? What's the point of doing this thing? I will tell you. So just let me give you an example, very brief example. So when we are talking about, Manrega kind of thing or any kind of thing, we are talking about transferring some money from the rich to the poor. And when I go by this popular saying by Keynes, digging holes on the earth and fill them back, the main idea that gives me, the economy is at a problem. The economic health is not good. So if economy's health is not good, then you have to ensure transfer of money. Now, forget about the economic health. Think of our health. So when I'm sick, and if you are sick and you visit a doctor and you tell him about what the problem is, then what is the prescription? If you are a smoker, then the first prescription is quit smoking. And the second prescription is do exercise. So I'll bank on these two. Quit smoking is very dangerous. So you need to get rid of this thing. Just like this smoking, all over the world, essentially the economy, particularly the developing economies, are plagued with corruption. So if there is corruption, you have to remove this corruption. And if it is impossible to remove corruption from the system, then try to minimize the degree of corruption that you have. Because unless you can do that, your money will never be transferred to the people who actually need this money. So this is the first prescription, get rid of this corruption. And that was also the first prescription given by the doctor for the revival of your health, of the health of the human being. Now coming back to the second proposition, and remember what John Maynard Keynes said. John Maynard Keynes said, digging holes on the earth and fill them back. Now you come to the exercise. Say when the doctor said that you please do regular exercise, and what we do, we start walking or we start running. Say I'm advised to run for 200 meters. So what I do, I start running and move forward 100 meters and then come back again by exactly the same amount of distance. It is 100 meters. So if you look at the output, it is zero. So, but what is happening during the process of your exercise, your health is improving. The same thing will happen in Keynesian economies if you apply. Just you transfer some money from this pocket, from the richer segment, from the government coffer to the poor people. Don't worry about the output. That will gradually improve the health of the economy. So I will bank on that thing. So this is one thing. So this is my argument. Manoj, can you just say me how much time do I have? How much?
Actually, up to 12:20, that is 10 minutes more. Okay?
Oh, 10 minutes more. Okay, I'll try to. Essentially, okay. So 10 minutes, yeah. So I'm trying to wrap up by 10 minutes. So this is one argument that I believe in currently. So another thing that is in the air that people are saying, what's wrong if we go for printing new money and injecting money into the system? So essentially, it's a very simple macroeconomic models. If the money supply goes up, if it is not essentially matched equally by the supply, then there would be an inflationary tendency. And if there is inflation, people will be in trouble immediately. But at the same time, the good side is that if there is inflationary tendency and the price goes up, and then after some time, maybe after 1 month or 2 months, the people working on that, people producing that, they will get the money and they will again reinvest the money. The economic ball will start rolling. This is one argument. The other argument is from the banking sector. If the money supply goes up, and then the rate of interest will definitely fall. If the rate of interest declines, then definitely it will yield some fillip or boost to the investors who are going to borrow some loan to buy flats, buy cars, and to go for business. But on the other hand, the flip side is that if the rate of interest goes down, then probably the people, the pension holders, or say relatively not well-off family members, they bank on the FD and the private savings, they will not have sufficient amount of money back from the rate of interest. So this is going to create another problem. So what I was saying just 1 minute back is that if there is an increase in demand, it has to be matched by supply. And again, if the rate of interest goes down, the supply is expected to go up. But at the same time, this is the thing that I mentioned at the very beginning. So if I'm the investor, why should I invest? Because I am not a person who is going to take a huge amount of risk and going to be bankrupt after a few months. So this should be the time where government should intervene, and government should go for public investment. Government should go for some state enterprises. Government can take the initiative to produce more, to meet supply with the demand that has been already generated, if there is any, by transfer of money from government coffers. Or in fact, this is my understanding of the thing. Government may use this corona spread or COVID-19 as an alibi to ensure the redistribution mechanism. Redistribute some money from the filthy rich people to the poor who need it. So it is inevitable. You have to ensure it. Otherwise, the economy cannot survive, because the rich people, they do not work. Essentially, who are the workforce? Workforce is a relatively middle class, like people like us. The poor people, the poorest of the poor, the rich, they just have money. They just get the profit. They do not work for the economy. But yes, they supply the money. So government has to ensure it. So they can take this initiative to solve this problem. So this is one part. So now, since I don't have much time, so I'm very quickly going to another thing, is that, so there is another apprehension around the world, is that people are going for deglobalization kind of thing. It is essentially, maybe some people are also thinking of that we are heading towards World War III. To me, it's not, because I believe that we are already in World War III. And that started with US-China trade war, because these days people are not going to fight with bombs and airplanes. So they are going to fight with trade policies and production, and etc. So this has started already with tariff walls, building tariff walls and retaliatory tariffs and all those things. And the COVID essentially accentuated the problem. So what is going to happen if we go for deglobalization? Deglobalization is the term which has been used by, his name is Walden Bello. Walden Bello is a Filipino sociologist probably, and he is also the parliamentarian there. So he wrote a book some 15 years back on deglobalization. So he said that it is inevitable. People have to think of this thing. It is not that you are stopping globalization, because globalization has its benefits. And a lot of people has benefited from globalization. But other group of people says that only because of globalization, global inequality between the rich and the poor, between the skilled labor and the unskilled labor is on a rise. But that's not the problem of globalization. That's the problem of the state. The state couldn't handle it. State couldn't ensure the redistribution mechanism from the rich to the poor. State couldn't tax the filthy rich people in a sufficient way. So that's not the problem of market economy. That's not the problem of globalization. This is what I understand. So, okay. So so I can see Jayanto Mondal is presenting. Please stop that. Okay. So, so this deglobalization phenomenon talks about, who is going to move, because India is also going for vocal for local, and some other countries are also went for complete closure of their international borders. So people cannot move from this country to other country. Now think of this H1 visa policy of the US government, Brexit of UK. So this is the same thing. You cannot move to US. You cannot go to Britain. So you have to come back and work in your country. So that is the idea of deglobalization and controlling the movement of labor. So the point is that, there are two major factors of production. One is labor and the other is capital. So the question boils down to whether the labor will move to the workplace or the work will come to the place where the labor resides. It sounds a little funny, but it is possible. It may happen. Work can come to the place where labor stays. Work can come to your residence. This is what's happening now. Webinar is reaching my house. I'm not going to attend the webinar. So if I look at this point from this perspective and try to understand the complementarity between labor and capital, then I think I have another 5 minutes. Okay. So here, from labor and capital perspective, essentially, at least for financial capital, Manoj worked a lot on financial capital. He knows much better than me. But financial capital is relatively more mobile than labor. So it is very easy to move financial capital from this place to another place. But at the same time, it has some problems that at any point of time, financial capital can be withdrawn. And for labor, you cannot withdraw overnight. And at the same time, financial capital has some risk also. When I give the financial capital to someone, there may be default of this thing, but that is not true for labor. So think of this situation, India and America. So if I go to America, this is a movement of labor. If I send my capital to America, this is a movement of capital. So when I'm sending my capital to America, I can at any point of time get back my money. But if I send my labor or if I go to US, it is not possible for very quickly to come back. On top of that, when I stay in America, I contribute in their economy. I take rent of my house there. I pay this. I also consume there. I also invest. So labor has some sort of advantage. So labor is more acceptable than capital. And then again, when labor goes there, labor migrates to another country, labor directly displaces some employment. So this gives a kind of visible negative impact on the political leaders. So this is what happened to America. Donald Trump came into power with this motto that he will stop this migration. He will restrict this visa policy that a lot of people are coming to US and displacing some people, US people from the labor market. But capital has this problem because when capital goes, I'm getting some feedback. So, yeah, I'm getting some feedback from some audio.
Yeah, Manoj.
So it's very difficult for me to continue.
Okay, Vishwajit, thank you.
Sorry?
Hello. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Okay, so just give me 1 minute, Manoj. I'm going to wrap up. 1 minute, okay? So the thing is that when capital I'm considering capital essentially creates an employment. But now the collateral cost of labor is very high because the possibility of corona infection is huge. So people are not allowing this labor to move. So one option is that you use this ICT, information communication technology, and you send your capital to the place where the people are residing. The labor need not to move out of their countries. In that way, I'm very sure that globalization is not going to end. Rather, globalization may take another shape. So my point at the end is that we have to come up with a proper mix of state and market. You cannot shun market because globalization will yield some results, but state has to monitor this result, whether this result is essentially beneficial for the economy, where the people are residing and working. So I hope that, yeah, we need to live with corona, but at the same time, we also need to find out what should be the economic situation during post-COVID era. Okay, so with this note, I will end here. Okay, thank you, Professor Chakraborty, Manoj da. Probably I have taken a little more time. Okay, thanks for allowing me.